Alright, so now we're going to talk about adding and subtracting fractions. My first example, just jump right into it. 1/3 plus 2/3. What's 1/3 plus 2/3? Well, the rule is, when adding and subtracting fractions, you find a common denominator. In this case, the denominator is the same, so it's common. That is, the denominator is 3. So I write my answer over the least common denominator, and I add the numerators. Okay, so I end up with 3 over 3, and then I always want to reduce my fractions if I can. 3 divided by 3, of course, is 1. Okay, what does that mean? A brief interpretation. Here's 1/3 of a whole plus 2/3 of a whole. If you add those together, what do you get? Well, you get 3/3, right, or 1 whole. That is, 1/3 plus 2/3 is 3/3. Okay? Let's do. We don't need to do this. I just wanted to show you kind of what's going on here if you try and think about it in terms of a part of a whole. Okay? So let's do some more examples. How about 1/9 minus 4/3? Alright, so in this example, I don't have common denominator, and that's important, right? I gotta realize they're not the same number. Okay, the first one was an easy one, this one's a little bit harder. So I gotta find the least common denominator. So remember, to find that least common denominator, you need the smallest number that 9 and 3 both divide into evenly, right? And that's gonna be, in this case, 9, right? 9 will go into 9 and 3 will go into 9. So once I recognize what the least common denominator is, I write both of my fractions over the least common denominator. Okay? In this example, you notice this doesn't change. The denominator didn't change, so the denominator doesn't change here either. So that stays 1. I didn't change that one at all. Okay, now this one I gotta adjust, right? 4/3. If I change the 3 to a 9, then I gotta change the 4. Okay? In a way that it doesn't actually change that value. So what did I do? I multiplied 3 by 3. So I got to multiply 4 by 3. That's what I should be thinking about. What did I multiply this number by to get this number? In this case, it was 3. So I got to do the same to the numerator. So look what I have. I rewrote 4/3 as 12 over 9. They're the same number, right? They're the same number. And why did I do that? This allows me to subtract, right? Because I need this least common denominator before I can subtract. Or add, same thing, all right? So 1/9 minus 12/9, again, that's going to be, you write your answer over your least common denominator, and think of it like this: 1 minus 12. We like to assign that negative with that numerator. 1 minus 12 gives me negative 11. Okay? Remember, positive and a negative, subtract, you get 11, keep the sign of the bigger number, in this case the 12. Alright? Let's do some more. 3/11 minus 1/3. Negative 3/11. Okay, remember, don't get these mixed up with multiplications. Completely different operation here. You shouldn't be trying to cancel out 3's here, right? Different operation. I recognize, fix that it's subtraction, okay? So what I want to do is I got to find the least common denominator. It's the first thing I think about, least common denominator. In this example, the two denominators, 11 and 3, 3 doesn't go into 11, right? So it can't be 11 like the last example. This one happened to be the least common denominator. It's different here, right? Because 3 doesn't go into 11. 11, of course, doesn't go into 3 evenly because it's bigger. So what we have to do is find the smallest number that these will both go into, okay? If you have trouble doing that, what you can do is start looking at all the factors of 11, okay? That is, if I want to look at 11 and then start going up, so I should say multiples of 11, right? 11, 22, 33, 44, and so on. Okay, and then see which one of those 3 goes into, right? Let me show you what I mean. 11 times 1 is 11, right? Obviously 3 doesn't go into that. We've already decided that. 11 times 2 is 22. 3 doesn't go into that, okay? 11 times 3, of course, I should recognize that 3 will go into 33, right? And then I can stop there. That's my least common denominator, okay? So if you can't you don't have to do this. If you can't figure it out, take the bigger of the two denominators and multiply by 1, then by 2, then by 3, and keep going until this other denominator will divide evenly into it. In this case, when we get to 33, we can stop. Okay, and again, what we did was we say 11, what did I multiply by to get 33? I multiplied by 3. So I gotta do times 3 here and then times 3 here, okay? And that'll give me 9 up top. This one I multiplied by 11, this one I multiplied by 11, so I should have 11 over here, okay? Now think about these signs. This one started off to be negative, so it's still negative. I like to assign that up there. And then this one was negative to start with, minus, it's still minus. Okay, so now what do? Leave the denominator the same, and now look what I have here. I got negative 9 minus 11. Negative 9 minus 11. Okay, so remember, they're both negative, so I add and keep the sign. That's my answer for that one, and I look to reduce that if I can, but nothing's going to go into 33 and 20, so I can't reduce it, so I stop there. Okay? All right, let's do a couple more. Negative 1/6 plus 3/4, least common denominator. Okay, again, if you have trouble finding it, in this case it's 12. Okay, I look for the smallest number that 6 and 4 both go into 12. Okay, 24 is a common denominator. 6 and 4 will both go into 24. It's not the least common denominator. You can still get the right answer if you do use 24, but you have to reduce it at the end. Okay, so we always want to find the least common denominator. How did I get 12? Well, if you can't get it right away, right, just start with your bigger fraction, bigger denominator that is, and start multiplying by 1, 2, 3, 4, and keep going until 4 will divide into it. Okay? So 6 times 1 is 6, 4 doesn't go into 6. 6 times 2 is 12, but I can stop there, right? Because I know 4 will divide into 12. Okay? So I rewrite it over 12. Notice I keep my signs as they were. This was negative to start, and this one's positive. And what did I do? I multiply this one by 2. So I multiply that by 2. Multiply this one by 3. So I got to multiply that by 3. Leave everything over the least common denominator of 12. And then negative 2 plus 9 is positive 7. Right? Positive 7. Okay, one more example. Negative 8/9 minus 4. So remember, again, here I have a fraction and an integer. So what I want to do is make that a fraction, right? Just like we did with the multiplication and division. Just write it over 1. And now everything works the same. The least common denominator between 9 and 1 should be 9. Okay? Minus here. Minus here. I didn't change 8/9, so I just leave it as 8/9. This one I multiply that by 9. So I gotta multiply this guy by 9, and that gives me 36 negative. And then I subtract. So I leave the denominator at 9, and I figure out what negative 8 minus 36 is. Negative 8 minus 36 is negative 44. Okay? And I look at that to see if it reduces, but nothing will go into 44 and 9, so I leave my answer like that. Alright? So that's it for this chapter. We've gone over a review of sign numbers, operations on integers, and then we talked about multiplication, division of fractions, and addition and subtraction of fractions. Okay? So you got a lot of homework to do, a lot of practice in order to get this down, so keep working.